Hello learners, I am Dr. Subodh Kesharwani, working with Indira Gandhi National Open University in the School of Management Studies. Being a program coordinator of this particular course called MCO3 Research Methodology in Statistical Analysis, we have a very thought-provoking session starting from various aspects of research and landing up to a very eagerly waiting topic that is called sampling. I think when we are talking about research, the sampling is going to play a very important role, and if you talk about the population, if you talk about the sample, if you talk about the various aspects, we have observed that how this sampling is quite important into it. So the today discussion is going to talk more about the curtain raiser to sampling, and we have various aspects prior to going into the depth of this sampling. What we have covered, let's recapitulate in a very faster mode. This is part of our block 1 theme, research and data collections, and we have already covered somewhere around 9 to 10 lectures. Is revolving around or starting from research, then business research, then research thought, then research FAQs, research methods, research plan and research problems, formulation of objectives, hypothesis, research design, collection of data. So what we have observed that during this whole course of discussion, that we have talked about the research, we have just glimpsed about what exactly the research is, then some building blocks had been there which revolves around the research. Then we have started talking about the objectives and then hypothesis, and in hypothesis we have seen that how this hypothesis is going to play a very important role as far as interacting with the respondents is concerned, and then the research design and then collection of data is there. So what we have observed that when we are going to talk about this hypothesis, we have seen that there also the sampling is going to play a very important role, because the whole sample talks about the data which need to be extracted, and when you are going to talk about the sample, you have to talk about the population. So and then from there how you are going to collect the data. So in the preceding sessions, as far as the collection of data is concerned, we have talked a lot about the primary data collection and secondary data collection. So this primary data collection talks about the first hand information, whereas secondary data is already the existing data which we are going to use or twist as per our need and requirement. So let's talk about what exactly this particular chapter is talking about. This is the 4th chapter of this particular block, and in total we have got almost 20 lectures in this 20 chapters in this research methodology and statistical analysis course, and we are here and just concentrating on the preamble part of sampling, what exactly the sample is and how the sampling comes into picture, and then what is the distinguishment between census, sample, survey and population, and why there is a need of sampling, and then what could be the essentials of good sample. So these are the the preliminary preliminary topic which we are going to cover vis-a-vis sampling, and then we will little bit throw a light on what exactly the sample size could be. And as far as the methods of sampling is concerned, either it could be random sample methods or non-random sample methods. We will take it in a more exclusive manner in a forthcoming sessions, and then sampling and non-sampling errors can also be taken care, because errors are of different nature, like sampling errors, non-sampling errors. Then how we are going to control the errors, because only talking about the error is not important. There are certain methodologies, there are certain modus operandi which can rectify the errors. So that is also going to play a very important role. So this chapter have some more discussions as we are talking about the today's discussion and the future discussions which going to revolve around this particular theme and format. So what we have observed that if we talk about the trend which is going on, the researchers usually cannot make direct observations of every unit of the population. That is very true, because when you talk about the population is a bigger circle and it's considered to be the universal. And when we are going to talk about the research, when you are going to talk about the pan-India research, I think the whole India could be the population in that case, and it's really cumbersome for the researchers to go at every aspect from underneath to pinnacle and do the research at every juncture. So how to narrow down their research, how to just get the foolproof model, the sampling procedure need to come up, because this sample is it's based on the population. Sometimes it could be the random sampling or stratified sampling. So there are various ways of methodology which are going to be used. We are going to definitely talk about all those. And when the population is very big in numbers, I think, when the data is quite big, in that case we are going to bifurcate in a very mathematical manner, very methodical manner, and try to concentrate or take the sample from every group or every zone, so that the bifurcation is there. If somebody is going his or her research on Delhi, the consumers in Delhi, as far as the e-commerce portal is concerned, then we are going to first bifurcate this particular Delhi zone into 4 zones, that is North Delhi, South Delhi, East Delhi and West Delhi. And then we try to extract some of the information from each zone, so that whatever the data we used to gather or collect, it have a homogeneous presence, and then active participation of the group is there. So anyway, what I mean to say that this is the way by which the research is going to come up, and instead the data we are going to collect the data from subset of population. That is very true, because if population is a set, then sample could be the subset of that. A sample is draw and make inferences about the entire population. We are randomly taking the inferences, and when you talk about the inferences, I think that is where this statistics is going to be play a very important role, because when you talk about the statistical analysis, it's bifurcated into 2 things, that is descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. So inferential analysis, so this is the way by which we are going to bifurcate, and gradually we are going to talk about all the terminologies. And in our past 9 to 10 discussions, we have observed that sampling was going to play a very important role in every discussions, and whenever we have an interaction with our learners, I think the word sample comes into picture. So it's a very eagerly waiting term, and since these terms have now come up, so it's our moral duty to just throw a light on what exactly the sample is, and how this the sampling and the procedures of taking the sample is going to. It's not like that you have got a population bank, you have got a bank of data, and you can just put your hands and extract the data from there. There must be certain modus operandi, there must be certain procedures, and there must be certain ways. And because if you are not going to follow all those procedures and the methodology, I think somewhere you will lack, or you will not get the holistic way of looking the things. The data which you are going to collect, it's have a very biased approach, or it's going to cater the particular class and creed, not having the holistic view. So if you are going to talk about the holistic view, I think that is where the role of sampling matters. And now not only the subject knowledge matters, but it also matters how you are going to extract the sample, how you are going to take the sample. And there are certain methods, there are sampling methods which are there, and we are going to talk about all those methods in a more elaborative manner. So ideally, the characteristics of the sample should correspond to the characteristics of population. That is very true, and there must be a proper synchronization between the population and the sample. So that is the reason what I was talking about, that somewhere this stratified random sampling, or the strategy is going to play a very important role, because the size of the data, size of the population is very big, and it's really cumbersome for the researchers to move or visit at every juncture. So what they are gradually doing, they are just taking the sample of that. A small portion of that particular cake is going to be taken care, and from that cake, from that portion, they are knowing what exactly the taste of the whole cake is. So that is the thing. So when we have got a bag of rice with us, we are not going to go into the depth of all the rice. We just take one rice and check it, and then from there we able to know that what could be the quality of the product is. It happens with many of the things. Sometimes we are not going in depth of it, but we can have a little bit flavor which can give the clear glimpse or the impression about that. So in that case, the conclusions drawn from the sample are probably applicable to the entire population. That is very true. And how you have taken the representation which is done on behalf of the population is need to be more meticulous and more dynamic, or more strategically taken. So anyway, we will talk more about what exactly the sample is. If you see this particular image, you find out that there are three colors which are considered to be the population, and from there we have taken certain data. So some we have taken from one group, other we have taken from red group, other we have taken from green group. So this is the way of representation, that we are not confined, we are not biased to only one class and creed, but exactly taking the information from varieties of group. So but again after certain time, what happened when we follow certain modus operandi and extract certain data from in the way of sample, after certain time what we observe, that though we are quite meticulous in nature, but still the problem occurs. So in that case, there is no thumb rule behind that. You have certain other ways to judge the judge the sample and take the sample from there. So if your random sampling fails, I think the stratified sampling or the convenience sampling, or there are a lot of ways, the quota sampling, and so we will definitely talk about all those terms which are quite omnipresent and going to play a very important role. So if we talk about in research terms, a sample is a group of people, objects or items that are taken from a larger population. So you have got one bigger circle, you have got one whole universal or population, and from there you are going to take a small measurement from that. So sample should be representative of the population, that is very true. And why the representation should be there? Because if I have talked about the researcher is just concentrating on Delhi as a whole, or the pan Delhi, so the universal or population could be whole Delhi. So in that case, their research is just confined to rotate around the Delhi, and there must be certain the modus operandi which can provide them a platform to collect the data. It's not like that you have taken Delhi as a population and you are collecting data from different states. So again, that is going to somewhat dismantle the research. So representation of the population is very important. If the population is Delhi or the population is pan India, then your research revolves around that particular jurisdiction only. It's not like that you have taken pan India as a base and you are doing the research from other western part of the world. So that is where the research is going to dismantle. So we are going to definitely talk about all those things in a more elaborative manner, and then generalize the finding from the research sample and to the population as a whole. So this is the way where interrelations come, because once you go through certain samples which had been extracted from the population, I think from there you get certain results which you can interpret and which you can float it to the because these samples are sometime more real time in nature. So when you extract the information, when you put the questionnaires to certain the respondents, now the respondents reciprocates. So these respondents are considered to be a part of the sample when you are going to collect the data. So a sample is usually a subunit within the universe. The universe consists of all the members of the distinct group. It could be a population. The universe of population is also total collection of units from which the sample can be selected. So sampling is a process used in statistical analysis in which a predetermined number of observations are taken from a larger population. So that is where the things are going to play a very important role. Now in our preceding sessions, we were just concentrating on collection of data or the data collection. So the data collection was done through primary data or secondary data. So now when you are emphasizing more on the primary data, I think and you have started making the questionnaires, and then you have started floating the questionnaires to the individuals or to the respondents. From there the collection of data comes. So the four important ingredients which are going to play as far as the data collection is concerned, the first and information is concerned, which we usually call the primary data. It could be population, it could be census, it could be sample or survey. So population is no doubt a bigger circle, and then sample is going to be extracted from that particular population. Census is more is a model which is going to be governed by the government, and when you talk about census is data about all individual units. It could be a people of household or are collected in the population. And as far as the survey is concerned, data are only collected for a sub part of the population. So and this part is called a sample. The manner you do the survey, like the questionnaire format need to be developed, and these questionnaire format need to be sent in a different mode right now, because the procedures and the format of sending has also been changed. There was a time when we are very rigid and just concentrating on brick and mortar mode, but right now what is happening, that you have got varieties of ways by which you can do the survey. Survey could be the online, survey could be offline, or survey could be in a hybrid manner. Some of the information which you float to the learners on a online manner, and they can reciprocate, they can write in a physical mode, and they can upload it. So this is somewhat called the blended model, or the hybrid model. So this hybrid model is coming up, where the survey is going to be taken not in a one mode, in a offline mode or a brick and mortar mode, but somewhat taking care in a online mode too. So we will definitely throw a light on these aspects also. So these data are then used to estimate the characteristics of whole population, because that is very true, because as I have told, that population size is quite bigger and it's really cumbersome. If somebody have taken Pan India as a base, Pan India as a research collection of data, I think it's really cumbersome for him to move to the every portion of that population and collect the data. So in that case, definitely, if the research is on a Pan India basis, there must be certain states which need to be taken care, and in that states also certain cities are going to be focused. It's not like that you can start taking the states and then moving all the cities. So so because time frames are there, the constraints are there, and you have to come out from that. But it's not like that you can have a very small population and very little sample size. But because if you have a very little sample size, what will happen? So it should not be not too big and not too small. If you are going to take a big sample size, what will happen? Certain things will become which could not be overlapped or intermingled with the results. So in that case, the problem occurs. So that is the reason you have to be quite methodical, and you have to start your journey in such a manner that at the end of the day, it leads to an accomplishment. If you are not going to accomplish the task in the prescribed time frame, ultimately you would be in a no man's land. So anyway, I am talking about, do samples provide better results than survey? Samples obviously provides better results than survey. That is very true, and it provides reliable and accurate results. And when you're talking about errors, I think we have a dedicated sessions in a coming days which talks about the errors, and errors can be easily located and rectified in the sampling methods. And sometimes the error comes because the data which you are going to collect is not going to match with that. There must be certain homogeneity when you are going to collect the data, and that is where you have to change your way of collecting the data, or the sampling methodology need to be changed. So now the thing is that why sampling? If you see this particular image, you find out that the bigger circle is there, the whole population is there, and from there we have just narrowed down ourselves to sample. And sampling is done because you usually cannot gather data from the entire population, and even in relatively small population, the data may be needed urgently, because there is a urgency, because urgency is going to play a very important role, because the way technology is coming up, the way research is changing, the way trend is changing as far as the business is concerned, the learning is concerned. If somebody is pursuing his or her research in e-commerce or e-business, I think the whole model is going to be changed. And if you are quite time-taking affairs as far as the sampling is concerned, I think somewhere your data could become redundant after certain time. So you have to move in a very fast-track mode, and the data need to be collected in a more urgent manner. That is where technology is going to play a very important role, and exclude in the population, data collection may take too long. So this is a sampling frame. If you talk about this sampling frame starts with the population, then sampling process is there. Whatever we have talked about, it's going to be interlinked or transformed in the form of image, where the sample comes up, and then you have inferences. I think the statistical inferences is navigating you at every stage, that by this time, by this way, you can update yourself, you can revamp yourself, you can change yourself. So what actually you are studying and what you want to study. So population is basically what you want to study, and sample is going to talk about what you actually study. So when you get the sample, I think that is the reason, the hypothesis somewhat is going to play a very important role. And what we have talked about in our hypothesis, that null hypothesis and alternate hypothesis, then accepted hypothesis and rejected hypothesis. So sometimes what happens, we have a very initial impression in our mind that whatever the data which we are going to collect, it somewhat overlap with the mental framework which we have developed in due course of time. But what happens when we float the data to the respondents, and respondents reciprocates, they are going to reciprocate in a different manner. And what results come, it comes in a first-hand manner, and majority of people, the masses, used to reply, the question which we had been asked in a very homogeneous manner, and we come to know that what we have thought of, it was wrong. So whatever the null hypothesis we have chosen, it become rejected. So ultimately, what is there, that you have in the basic stage you have planned to accept the hypothesis, but end of the day, when respondent reciprocates, you have rejected the hypothesis. So it means that whatever the basic assumption you have made in your mind, it's become false, and then what the respondents have reciprocates become true. So this is the way by which the sampling model used to work, and it happens with majority of time that there are certain the initial assumption, the basic assumption which we think of, that as an individual it could be right, but when mass used to reciprocate, I think the things come in a different manner. So but end of the day, you have to accept what the masses is going to say. If the majority of people are having a inclined view about the particular thought which you have floated, I think you have to accept that. So whatever you have what assumption you have in the very beginning stage need to be rejected. So this is the basic genesis behind the hypothesis, and this hypothesis is linked with the sampling also. So that was the reason we have thrown a very dedicated session on hypothesis, and now how this hypothesis is going to link with the sampling, that is all about. So anyway, this is the statistical inference, and when we talk about the statistical inference, is the act of generalizing from a sample to a population with calculated degree of certainty. This degree of certainty talks about that whatever things we have thought of, it's going to be sure and certain. So we want to learn about population parameters, population then move through sample and then data, then statistical inference is there, then parameters comes. So we will gradually see how this statistical analysis is going to add a feather in the cap as far as the research methodology is concerned, because this particular course not talks about research methodology, but elaborately talks about how you are going to use the statistical analysis. So one way we are building the concept with the help of research methodology, and at the second hand we are using the statistical analysis which can be interrelated with that. So a lot of the social thought is going to link with the mathematics, and algorithm is going to be used. This algorithm is going to build the platform in a more systematic and more stratified manner. So if you see population is equal to census, then sample is equal to survey, and now you see how the things are rotating, that prediction about the population based on the sample data. So anyway, these are the certain ways by which the model is going to be done. Population is at one end, then you are going to have an exploratory data analysis which could be more elaborative in manner, and sample need to be taken from all the aspects. It's not like that if you bifurcate into north, south, east and west, so from every juncture, from every zone, the data is going to be extracted so that the real presence of the data is there, and then probability is going to be used, then inference is going to be used. So mathematics is going to be a very important backbone as far as the research is concerned in the present scenario. Either it could be the science research, or it could be the mathematics research, or it could be the humanity research or social science. So everywhere you find out this algorithm is going to play a very important role, and that is the reason if you talk about the commerce company, if you talk about the big players like Amazon or the Facebook, who are pioneer in social networkings and e-commerce, they are massively using this algorithm and search engine optimization, and they are very practically and very strategically using the data. And when they are using the data, I think that is where they are going to get the very good results. And whatever the population they have, whatever the gamut of consumers they have, they can retwist the data. So that is where the new terms called the big data analytics, or the algorithm is going to come. And now you find out this algorithm is somewhat twisting the data and knowing the taste about the consumers. So one consumer who is just doing the shopping from any of the portal, now you get the taste and opinion about it by just way you are going to do the data. So and somewhere this data is quite dynamic in nature. It's not static in nature where the consumers have reciprocate and you have not reciprocate. It's moving in a two-way manner, in a more frequent manner. So what we have observed, that what are the reason for sampling in research? So to bring the population to manageable numbers, that is very true. To reduce cost, and if you are going to cater yourself to the particular population or huge number of population, ultimately the more cost is going to be involved. It's like that if the research is on the pan-India basis, and if you are going to cater or do the research by taking care all the populations, I think the time will be more and cost is going to be enhanced, and whatever the sample size is there, it's big in numbers. Now the question comes how you are going to regulate the response sheet which had been come from the respondents, because when you get the response sheet, it could be quite huge in numbers. Again, it's a big challenge that how you're going to narrow down that and come to the conclusion. So to help in minimizing errors from the respondents due to large number in the population, and sampling helps the researchers to meet up the challenge of time. That is very true, because when you do the sampling, you get varieties of results from the varieties of places. So now you just have to accumulate, and when various data, various researchers, various respondents reciprocates and you start accumulating, you have a different thought in your mind, and that thought is somewhat overlap, somewhat deviate, or somewhat intermingle, but whatever the end results comes, it's quite mind-boggling. So this could be the essential of good sample. A sample must represent a true picture of the population from which is drawn. A sample must be unbiased by the sampling procedures. That is very true. And while taking a sample, one has to be quite cautious that the data need to be taken care in a more free flow manner. If you take a biased information, ultimately what happened, you will lead to a conclusion which is not fruitful to you. So sample must be taken at a random so that every member of the population of data has an equal chance of selection. A sample must be sufficiently large but as economical as possible, and that is very true, because economics is also going to play a very important role, and sample must be accurate and complete. It's not like that whatever the survey or questionnaire had been floated to the individual respondents, and they just fill the 30-40% information, and or they can just fill the close-ended questions and not able to answer the open-ended questions. Sometimes these open-ended questions, though it's different from the close-ended questions, but these open-ended questions are quite agile in nature and directly come from the heart of the respondents. So whatever they used to write, maybe others is going to write differently. So the information which is given by in a open-ended questions are quite thought-provoking and have certain weightage when you are going to accumulate your research or accumulate your data collection. So it should not leave any information incomplete and should include all the respondents. Adequate sample size must be taken considering the degree of precision regarding the results of inquiry. So how to determine minimal sample size? Now every time you thought about when we have a lot of discussion on related to sampling, we have observed that we used to talk more about the sample sizes. Why we are emphasizing more on the sample sizes? Because if your sample size is bigger, ultimately you will have a very different opinion. Either you can able to complete certain zones. If we talk about Delhi and you have taken a jurisdiction or taken thousands or 2,000 as a population, and from there you just narrow down to 400, and which can be bifurcated from one zone like north zone, east zone, south zone and west zone. You have collected extracted data from 3 zones, but you have left one zone. So whether the research or the result which used to come is foolproof or final, I think no, because the 3 zones you have, the data you have collected from 3 zones, but one zone you have left. Maybe the people who are living in other zone, or the fourth zone, have different mindset. And when you talk about Delhi as a whole, I think the people here have got a different mindset. The South Delhi people is different from the North Delhi people. Their culture little bit, that there's change of culture and change of model. So how you're going to bridge this gap? Because if you are talking about the consumers of e-commerce in Delhi perspective, I think those consumers, there are certain consumers who are frequently using or buying the FMCG goods from online mode, but the North Delhi people are not buying. So if you are floating the data over there, you get the different results, because they are not using, so they are going to give nil or not applicable results. So one has to quite cautious that what exactly you are doing. So that is the reason when you are going to talk about the research, when you are going to talk about e-commerce, or selling of the fast moving consumer goods through e-commerce, or the behavior of the consumers, I think there we have to be quite cautious that whether there is a penetration of this particular thought or the theme which we are talking about. If they are not using it, if we are talking about internet, if we are talking about the consumers who have used the internet, and we are just revolves ourselves to the rural areas, and we have been to those rural areas where there is no internet facilities. So what the consumer is going to do in that case? In that case, the consumer is going to reply something which could be, which is not going to give you the results, which is useless for you. So your data collection, your data methodology, and your sample size, your population is quite strategically formatted and need to be governed. So, and that is needed to determine the minimum sample size. If the data are continuous or discrete, if the population is finite or infinite, what confidence level is desired or specified, the magnitude of maximum allowable error we will definitely talk about due to bias, dispersion, or non-reproducibility, and the likelihood of occurrence of specific event. So this is what exactly we have talked about. And little bit we have talked about population sample, and census and sample is there. If you have a difference between the census and sample, a census is a study we have already talked about, and it is known as a complete enumeration, which means a complete count. And when you are going to talk about the census method, is less time consuming, and more or less the government is more emphasizing on the census methodology. And if you see the comparison between the two, enumeration is complete, whereas in sampling it is partial, and handful of units of this population, and each and every unit of the population. So when data is to be collected from each member of the population, it is known as census survey, and when data is to be collected only from some members of the population, known as sample survey. So there is a difference between census and survey, and census collects information about every member of the population, whereas survey collects information from the sample of the population. If you see the difference, census is more detailed and accurate. Census takes long time to complete because you are just emphasizing on the population, whereas in survey you are just emphasizing on the sample. So survey is not accurate or reliable as a census, because it's very true, because when you are talking about the elaborative result, when you are talking about a particular class and creed, I think little bit the deviation is there. But survey can be conducted by anyone. Census is generally conducted by the government, as I have already quoted, and censuses are not conducted frequently. It can be conducted after certain time. A government used to conduct after 5 years, and survey can be conducted more frequently. So if you talk about the sample size is very important, and it's required certain mathematics, certain methodology, which we will definitely talk about when we are talking about the methods. As sampling method is concerned, sample size determination is the act of choosing the number of observations or replicates to include in a statistical sample. The sample size is an important feature of any empirical study. That is very true. When you talk about the empirical study, and when you are talking about the collection of the first data, first-hand information, or the primary data, it usually called the empirical study, and in which the goal is to make inferences about the population from a sample. And if you are going to make inferences about a population, you are using a statistical analysis, and you are applying certain tools and techniques. By that, you are able to know whatever the sample you have taken is somewhat representing the particular population. So sample size refers the number of participants or observations included in a study. This number is usually represented by n, and the size of sample influence two statistical properties: the precision of our estimates and the power of the study to draw conclusion. And that is more important. It's the moral duty of every researcher to enjoy the end of the results which they have, and enjoy the end of the research which they have done. So end result, and getting the end result, it's very, though it's very tough, but it's a moral duty of the researchers to accomplish the task and to the conclusion. So there is a small big sample size, and sample size is too small. If you see what is whether it's acceptable or not, if sample size is more, you can get a little bit better results. So determining appropriate sample size, how precise do you want to be, like how sure you want to be your answer, that is more important. That is where you have a combination of close-ended questions and open-ended questions. Sometimes the questionnaire is built in such a manner that it follows only the close-ended question, that is yes and no. So how much variation is there in the population you are studying, and how you're going to bring the variation, low variation, high variation, and how small of an effect of you want to be able to identify, because for that the certain model need to be done, and this is going to be limbed. So which sample size do we want exactly? So these are the certain the questions which need to be come up when you are going to talk about the sample size, and whether we can only afford a sample of one, or there are certain the questions which comes in our mind, and when you are having a less sample size, what will happen? You are going to be get a very minute result. So there is a possibility that that you will get a good errors if your sample size is not strong. So that is the reason sample size is going to play a very important role, and this is called the classification of sampling methods. That is probability samples, non-probability, then systematic, stratified, cluster, simple random, convenience, snowball, judgment or quota, and some of other upcoming sampling methodologies is there. It's not, there's no thumb rule or rocket science behind that you should rigid to this particular sampling methods. But and there are certain sampling errors also, because of portion not the entire population is going to be surveyed, because if you have taken a small portion from the particular cake, I think sometimes what happens, the other half is not quite good, but you have taken a sample from the good part, so you get a result which is quite good, and you have left the other side of the coin. So the modus operandi, the designing need to be done in such a manner that you get the flavor of both the sides, that is the head part or the tail part. So anyway, I think in our forthcoming sessions we are going to emphasize more on classification of sampling methods, which is a very important ingredient as far as the sampling is concerned, because we have today built the concept of sampling, but the execution comes only when you are going to apply the sampling methodology. So in our forthcoming session we are going to talk about the sampling methods, and then we can also talk about if there are certain errors and how these errors is going to be rectified, or or resolved at that time, or afterwards when you have started the research, or in the mid of the research. So I think as a researcher, you have to be always open your eyes, and you have to visualize that things could be, you are just entering into a park or a Jurassic Park. If you are in the park, simple park, I think you will have everything in a good manner. But when you are in the Jurassic Park, you have to interact with the dinosaurs. So when you have started a research, when you have started a methodology, I think you have willingly entered yourself into a Jurassic Park, and you have to be quite cautious, and you have to be quite stringent always, that how you are going to come out from the problem, because life could not be a bed of roses when you are talking about the collection of the sampling. So there the certain modus operandi, certain model which is going to be applied, and you have to work as a juggler also in that case, that if you fail with one of the methodologies, you can apply the other methodologies. So I think by that way we can wind up this particular session, and it will be continued in a coming days, and we are definitely going to talk about the certain sampling methods, which is definitely going to add a feather in a cap and make our learners more acute with how this methodology is going to play a very important role. Thank you very much. Thank you.